So, if you're a bookkeeping firm or an accounting firm and you're trying to figure out how to improve the client experience and how to generate more streams of revenue for the firm, well, that's what today's webinar is about because we're going to be talking about how we use LiveFlow plus Google Data Studios to automate dashboard reporting, which has allowed us to improve the client experience as well as create new streams of income because our clients are paying us extra for this custom reporting. Plus, other accounting firms are also hiring us to build these white label type of dashboards so that they can use it with their clients. So stay tuned for today's webinar. I'm going to be talking about how we did it and how it all works. So today's webinar is really about how we use LiveFlow and Google Data Studios. Now, for you, those of you that may not be familiar with LiveFlow, LiveFlow is an amazing tool that allows us to automatically pull our data from QuickBooks for all of our clients directly into Google Sheets. We can set up templates and is at the click of a button. After the bookkeeping team has done all the bookkeeping in QuickBooks, we hit a button and it automatically refreshes in Google Sheets. Now, what we did is we took it a step further and we added Google Data Studios to add another layer of reporting, and it has been a phenomenal experience for our clients. So, before I jump too deep into that, what I do want to talk about is client advisory services because a lot of firms are looking at how do we improve our, how do we improve our service or how do we offer something else that really helps our clients more? And one of those ways is a lot of firms are getting into client advisory services. Now, client advisory services could be a whole list of things. I mean, from IT implementations to forecasting, modeling, financial analysis. I mean, it could be different types of analysis and it could be reporting. And so at the end of the day, one of the things that we figured out with client advisory services is that it really comes down to something very simple. It's providing your client with tools or information that helps them make better business decisions. And if you can figure that out, then you're playing in the client advisory services field. And I will say is when you can step into client advisory and you leave just doing bookkeeping or you leave just doing accounting and tax work, when you can step into client advisory services, it creates a new relationship with your client. Plus, your clients are willing to pay you more for it because at the end of the day, they're trying to make business decisions. Now, before we go any further, I know for those of you who may not be familiar with me, I'll tell you a little bit about my background. So I started off in public accounting, and I started off as an auditor. I wasn't on the client advisory side when I started off in public accounting. After public accounting, I left there. I went to work for a Fortune 500 company called Navistar. Did several different roles there. One of my bigger roles that I did was investor relations. There, I spent a lot of time interacting, reading, and analyzing Wall Street analyst models on our company and advising the CEO, the CFO on and the VP of investor relations how we needed to position the messaging for the company, how we needed to explain the financial story of the business in our next earnings call or when we met with the major banks or our major investors. And after that, I went to work for General Electric, Fortune 500 company, and really focused on a lot of our global operations from accounting of how do we centralize a lot of the accounting functions that we were doing in different parts of the world so that we could improve the overall process as well as working in probably the most profitable segment of General Electric's business. The division that I was the senior finance manager for produced probably 35% of the entire global company's annual profit. So I spent some time there. After that, my wife and I wanted to get out of the Midwest, went down to work for a tech company in the Carolinas, was the director of FP&A there, worked there worked there for a little over a year, helped them raise about 85 million in private equity funding. We also bought two other companies and built out a finance team, built out kind of the annual planning process and all of the FP&A functions. Then I decided to leave all of that and to start my own firm. And we started off doing a lot of CFO work because we were really good at doing that. And one of the things that we realized is there was a big gap in the market for bookkeeping. So now what our firm does is we do bookkeeping and we do CFO work for clients. And then outside of all that, we create a ton of webinars and free content. There's a couple of shows that my wife and I produce. The show is The Stuff Your Accountant Isn't Telling You, where we talk about the types of things that business owners are complaining about when they're working with accountants. Because I've hosted another show called the Business Talk Library Interviews, where I've interviewed over 550 business owners and business leaders in the last 2.5 years. And they share a lot of complaints that they have with their bookkeepers, their accountants, or their EAs. And we talk a lot about that in the show. And so a lot of bookkeepers and accountants listen to that show because they're like, hey, I can get inside tips on what not to do to make sure I don't lose my clients. Plus, we work with a lot of law firms. So I host a show called The Law and Finance Show, where I talk about, the business and the finance side of running a law firm, because that's one of our major target client audiences. And we also host a show called The Finance and Accounting Show, where we bring on firm owners from, small to large firms. And we have conversations with them about how things are going in their firm, how things are going with the industries that they support. And we've had firm owners on from the US, from Canada, from Australia, from, the UK, from different parts of Europe and Germany, as well as accounting firms in Africa and South America, because what we realize is a lot of them are having some of the same challenges. So we want to hear and provide that conversation to all of our listeners, where they can hear from experts from around the world what's working, what's not working. And so that's my background. Now, the reason why I bring all that up is because in that wide spectrum of my own experience, plus the show of talking to accountants and accounting firms and their experience in different areas, one of the things that we realize is that if you are going to get into client advisory services, one of the probably lowest barriers to entry and probably very profitable area to get into client advisory is to focus on reporting. Because there are a ton of different things you can do in client advisory, but reporting is probably the easiest, and it is a profitable way to get into it, because we are helping a lot of bookkeepers understand that you don't have to be this phenomenal expert to be really good at the reporting side. Because at the end of the day, the business owner needs to see the information in a way that makes sense for them. Now, one of the ways of improving that reporting experience is to go with dashboards. Now, you may think about, a ton of different things when it comes down to dashboards. And it's like, hey, well, every tool already has built-in dashboards. But at the end of the day, as I said, when it comes down to client advisory services, it's presenting the information or providing tools that will help the client make smarter decisions. And the way that some of the dashboards are created in some of these built-in tools, they're not always designed with your client in mind. And so a lot of times you may look at different platforms, and I'll just I'll share my screen. Now, here's a list of when I was searching for dashboards. As you can see, there's a long list of tools that do dashboard reporting. And as you can see, Some of them are a little more pricier than others. Some of them are very reasonable price, and some of them have them built in. But the thing that we really focused on was going with how do we create something that gives us that ability to customize it to the client's specific needs. And oftentimes, what we found is what a lot of those other tools did. I mean, they might have been great, but it was probably way more complicated than what the client needed. So, one of the things that we wanted to do is find a simple way to build custom tools. And that is how we landed on a Google Data Studio. So, let me show you one of the, I would say, one of the first types of dashboards we built for a client. This was a custom dashboard that we built for a client from scratch. And if you look at this and you compare this to some of the other dashboards you've seen out there, it may not have the greatest features in there, but what this did is this gave the client what they needed, and it is fully customizable. And the good thing, though, or I guess you say the even better thing that we liked about it is because it's in Google Data Studios, is actually a free app. And so one of the things that we started doing is realizing that, hey, we can use LiveFlow to pull the data from QuickBooks into a Google Sheet. And then from that Google Sheet, we can then populate these dashboards. And at that point, our entire dashboarding process became completely automated. Because once we finished doing all the bookkeeping in QuickBooks, at the press of a button, all of this can be updated. Now, some of the great features about this was that clients, if they wanted to go back and see a prior month, because that was one of the questions we get a lot, where someone will say, well, how do we do last month? And you'd have to go pull a report, send it to them, or you send them a spreadsheet that they're not familiar with. Well, with this, they can simply change the date and all of the data in the charts start to change for them. So this made it so much easier for our clients to understand what was happening in their business and how things were working in their business. Now, just showing you this probably doesn't answer a lot of the questions that you have. What you probably really want to see is, how does this actually work? Like, really jump into the details. So before I go into that, let me say one more thing about dashboards. At the end of the day, one of the things we have to think about when it comes down to dashboards is you can have very complicated dashboards or you can have very simple dashboards. The main point that you are trying to achieve is the same thing that happens, let's say, when you're driving a car. If you're looking at your dashboard, what you really need are the indicators for if there is a problem, or if you're low on fuel, or if you're low on a charge, if you have an electric vehicle. I mean, what you're looking for are the warning signs that pop up. Is it red, yellow, green, or hey, how are we doing? Are we in a good zone? Because at the end of looking at all that, what it does for a driver is it gives them comfort that, hey, I understand what's going on. I know what decisions I need to make. If my gas light comes on, hey, I know that, hey, I have a probably maybe 30, 25 miles before I need to stop and get gas and fuel. The same thing happens with your financial dashboards. And when you think about it that way, that is what will help you build better dashboards for your clients. Now, let's just jump back into the dashboard. So, for those of you that are, LiveFlow clients already, this probably looks very familiar to you. I mean, it is simply what we did is we went into LiveFlow and we connected a client. And what we decided to do is we decided to pull in that client's information. So we did all the accounting, we did all the bookkeeping steps in QuickBooks, and then we came over into LiveFlow and we said, hey, all right, let's pull all the data in from LiveFlow, and you can create custom reports and all of that stuff. Here's the P&L that we pulled in. Once we pulled that P&L in, next what we had to do is figure out, okay, all right, the way the P&L comes in, there is some level of, I guess you say, formulas that we did have to add in to customize this, because as it sits, this won't go right into feeding into a dashboard template. what you will need to do is we did have to convert it some. And that's where we had to build some custom formulas here, where we went through and we took it from this format to build it into a vertical table format. Once we built it into a vertical table format, then the information was ready to go. Now, the good thing about this is this tabular format that we built, we don't have to go in and change it every single month. Whenever we're ready to update the data, we just simply click refresh and the data just populates based on what it is pulling from LiveFlow. So as LiveFlow updates, this automatically updates because of the way that we built it and the way we set it up in the table format. Now, after you set it up in the table format, one of the things that you have to do is you can go into the edit, and what you'll have to do is each box that we built it one by one because we knew the specific things that the client wanted to see. So we built it one by one, and what we did is we connected this file. And if you go to your ad source, we connected that simple Google sheet that we were populating all of our information in. We connected it to Google Data Studios. Now, whatever happens on this spreadsheet automatically feeds over into Google Data Studios and automatically populates on these charts. So if I wanted to look at another month, and let's say if I wanted to look at, let's go back to April. Let's say if I wanted to look at April, I can change it back to April. And as you can see, all the data updates, which is amazing. Now, let's check it just to make sure. So we're looking at April. Revenue was $55,000 in April for this company that we're looking at. So if we go to April of 2022, revenue was $55,000. Now, let's just do this just for the sake of the test. And let's just delete that out, and we deleted out the other columns. Now let's just go here and let's see. Now, I will say, because there is that interface in there, it may take a second to update, but as you can see, that change that we just made just happened here. Now, if I go back and I refresh this, what you will definitely see and should see is that whatever data gets refreshed from LiveFlow feeds over into the files. And when we click refresh, your answer goes back. Now, so one of the things that you want to really think about and look at is that all of this data is constantly updating real time based on what is feeding from LiveFlow back into QuickBooks, or from QuickBooks into LiveFlow. And as we said before, if you're trying to get into advisory services, there are a ton of different things that you could do. But if you're thinking about your bookkeeping business, you may not necessarily have the time to go do all those other things, or you may not have the skill set. But what you do have is you already are doing the bookkeeping. You already have access to all of the data that you need to create a custom dashboard like this. There isn't anything new that you have to do. Now, if you want to build these type of dashboards yourself, it may take some learning. I mean, for me, it took me maybe about 16 hours, and I met someone that knew how to code Google Data Studio dashboard. So I learned a little bit from them and practiced on it for 16 hours, and I was able to get up and running. And you may say, well, Terrell, I don't necessarily have that amount of time. Well, that is one of the things that we're doing for a lot of different bookkeeper firms, is they're saying like, hey, we would love to have a tool like this to share with our clients, because we think that our clients could really use this type of tool. So what we're doing is we're actually building white label versions of this, where we build all the background information, we do all the custom building of the dashboard, and then we hand the files over to you to where your firm can then use it to create the dashboards, or you can publish new dashboards for your own clients. Now, the good thing about this is that once we create the template, if your clients are pretty similar, you can probably reuse the same template for different clients. which is a good thing for you because that means you only have to pay for one template to be created. You don't have to pay for a template for every single client. And that is a good way to do it. Now, one of the things that we're also doing is we're creating an in depth course where we actually walk through some of the details on all of how Google Data Studio works, like all the different styles, how you create some of the charts, and how you start from a blank page to create something like this. And we'll go step by step in every piece of it. We'll even break down some of the formula arrangements and the logic behind some of these formulas that we built in here. So when you want to design a custom one for yourself, you'll have a step-by-step process as we walk through how we did this and how we broke it down. But at the end of the day, I think it is best for you to think about what makes sense for your client and ask yourself, would your client prefer to have this information, or would your client prefer that you just email them a PDF version of their profit and loss statement and their balance sheet? Because I will say, in all of the interviews that I've done in talking to business owners about their relationship with their accountant, something that has been very, very common is that a lot of business owners have said is that when they're working with their accountant just sends them a PDF and they don't understand it at all. They wish that they could get something a lot simpler. And I will tell you, there are companies that are paying us about $7,000 to create dashboards for them because they really need the data broken down in a way that they understand it. And so I think if you're a bookkeeping firm or you're an accounting firm, you're trying to get into client advisory, the reporting route is a wide open lane for you. And there are companies that are willing to pay big money to have you build out a simple dashboard for them. And now, by using LiveFlow and Google Data Studios, you can actually automate that dashboarding tool and you can help your clients by adding more value to them. And you can help your own business by adding more revenue to your business. Now, as I said, we host several different podcasts and we talk about a lot of these things. And if you're an accountant or you're a bookkeeper, probably the most relevant show that we create is probably the stuff your accountant isn't telling you. So, if you want to learn more about that and you want to find out when we are releasing the full course where we go step by step of a Google Data Studio, how to use it, how to build out a custom dashboard, definitely check out our website, thebusinesstalklibrary.com, and look out for the show, the stuff your accountant isn't telling you. Thanks for tuning in.